I started the stream, then I looked myself in the camera, and then I'm like, oh, I'm wearing a green shirt still. I forgot I did this. I forgot I did this. Let me just there now. I have a body. No, I'm joking. Was anime really a mistake? I think that's a famous quote from what was his name? Toriyama, the guy who did like Kiki the Flying Delivery Witch and like the Princess Mononoke, Ghibli films. Right. The guy who basically like led those projects was very famous for a quote saying anime was a mistake or whatever. Um, if it was or wasn't, like whatever. I think what he said is, I think he was. I think people lose what I think he was trying to assess, which was the direction that anime went or the storytelling format. And I can imagine that's what he was looking at this from as the storytelling format because I kind of tend to believe that manga or comics in general are a really great format for sparking the interest of people. Um, a film I watched with the Rabbit Hole crew, great film, Doctor Parnassus and the Doctor Parnassus and the can't even remember. But basically it's a sort of like rendition of good and evil, good and evil, playing through various people in what their decisions would be. Like, and these decisions that these people would make would either decide if they went to heaven or hell. And, you know what I mean? Kind of like the devil playing his tricks and getting you to take temptation. Or, I don't know, Dr. Parnassus in the Imaginatorium? Can't even remember the film name, but it was a really good film. I really suggest watching it. Um, but in that, I came to the conclusion that storytelling is the ultimate format for kind of like teaching people or sparking people's interest. The reason why I say this is because when I was growing up, I remember, I think it was Fruit Baskets. It was like a romance, very bubbly art style manga. And from that, or at least that same person introduced me later to I Shield 21, which became like this manga became the sole reason why I joined the football team. And the more manga I discovered that related to like just things, I remember it was Yukari Bread. I think that's what it was called. It was a manga about baking bread, and the gimmick behind the character, at least his superpower, was that his hands had they were extra warm, where they generated more heat than usual. So because of that, while he was working the dough or kneading the dough, the dough would rise with his hands. So it was kind of like his superpower and stuff. And like it had a tournament arc. It was very interesting. Right, that got me into bread making. So I've loved to bake for a very long time. And that was the reason why. I joined various sports, and anytime I joined a new sport, I would there was a manga that I could accompany with it, and very interesting. Another one that was kind of like really influenced me was Hajime no Ippo, which was a boxing one, a boxing manga that got me to look for a local gym in my area when I think I was a sophomore or a junior. Joined the boxing club, went every day, and because I saw the character diligently working the way that he did, I was literally quite the first one at that gym, and I wouldn't leave at closing. But I would diligently work and like went through my routine day in, day out. And I remember how seriously I took it that summer. And it was because I was really inspired by Hajime. I think that was his name. No, Ippo was his name. And just really inspired by the manga and like the storytelling that I like, right? I wanted to be that character. I wanted to pursue that sort of thing. So I look at manga as a very interesting tool in terms of propaganda. And I think a lot of people don't view it that way. I think a lot of people get caught up in the veneer of the caricatures that are usually portrayed on the front of you, and it's because like, dude, like they're getting data from marketing firms, and these marketing firms are telling them like, this is popular, this is popular, this is popular. Go to your authors and tell them to write things that relate to these topics, and it'll sell, and this and that. So there's a sort of a bottleneck tends to happen with a lot of these mangas. And it's kind of funny, manga will then spark the interest in order for just reading a normal book. I think I've read far more many novels that are translations of Japanese novels just because um the topics or the themes, or I just see a lot more coming out of Japan, Korea. I've read some Chinese manga. It's very loose. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it's very episodic. It feels like an AI is kind of like generating events that happen in some of these storylines. So it's kind of like whatever. There is something very important to storytelling and understanding storylines as a whole, and I think the Japanese and the Koreans are currently doing it the best. Only because they're the ones that have an industry behind it, right? They're the ones that are actively working towards it. While in the West it's stagnated to what it is now, I only really think this because of the way that some of these mangas are published. They're on a weekly schedule, so that means there is an artist who has to produce at least 12 pages every week. Um, there are other ones that fall under different categories that I think go up to 24 pages, and they become more illustrative work. Then there's subcategories. There's so much in terms of storytelling that goes on in Japan that I'm like, it just makes me think of how powerful storytelling is in sparking the minds and the interest of younger minds. So one of the ones that I can point to is like Doctor Stone. So Doctor Stone is a post-apocalyptic scenario where people are turned to stone and people slowly start waking up in a world where they have nothing. Like they've started from with primitive tools, or at least some of the basic tools. And following the character story, you basically see him go from nothing to eventually being able to make Coca-Cola from like the most primitive of things. So it's very interesting to see that, you know what I mean? Like, you couldn't get a huge group of people to learn any of this bullshit through normal circumstances. Our public education sucks. Finding teachers, let alone that could explain this very adequately and very quickly. And, you know, there's much to be desired of public education the way it is now. I'd imagine that we could develop systems that allow for people to learn these things, but it's not very conducive to the society that is desired currently. And the only people that are exploring methods of trying to introduce topics to the populace in a weird way is manga and anime. And the reason why, what sparked interest in making this video or making this topic, is I was watching a manga about pharmacy and pharmaceutical work. And I thought it was very interesting because of the approach that this right now it's currently airing. It's an anime for right now. It's airing, I think there's up to 3 episodes right now. But I thought it was very important to understand that pharmacy to some degree isn't bad. Like, I think what largely has been lost is the fact that medicine as a whole, or at least pharmaceutical medicine, was just a synthesized way of replicating what existed in natural life, right? I think ginger root was something used for penicillin, or how penicillin itself exists in these various other plants, and et cetera, right? Essentially, these medicines are extracted from these plants and then used for patient work. So there is there is some grain of truth in pharmaceutical stuff. I think what we get lost in is the fact that how profitable it is. How profitable is it to sell a cure versus to sell care work? I don't know how to word this very specifically. Duration. How long can I, right? Like, how much money can I generate instead of it being of how can I help you? Either way. So this anime about pharmacy, right? People get lost in the veneer of like, oh, anime, big eyes, big titties, this and that, and whatever they get caught up in is because of what they see on the surface. But just find it interesting that I think this is the only format that's trying to do this in a meaningful way to spark the minds and the interest of people. Because at least when I took Japanese in college, our professor told us that the way people view these TV shows is the way that Americans view soap operas, or the way Latinos view novellas. These are just loose scenarios that people are just digesting for the context, the theme, and that's why anime doesn't take a whole lot of effort into distinguishing art. They just kind of use the same thing, because what they're really playing out is the scenario. They're playing out the storylines. So how the characters look, or making it meaningfully different from anything else, doesn't really matter. What really matters is what kind of story could we make here? What kind of themes can we touch? And I think that's why it's very interesting that they put so much effort into their voice acting, their crafting of music, and all these various other additions that create the ambience that they normally do. Of course, people get lost in, well, I can't understand the voices. And I'm like, look, this is the way that a Westerner would perceive this. This is why like very book heavy nerds are usually the ones that go into like reading manga, or they go into like watching a Japanese show with Japanese audio, but they'll read it. Um, I don't know. It's very different, right? People digest media very differently. Like I know people from my neck of the woods would how do I say this? They would not listen to like British television. They would not listen to like, if it was way out of the realms of Americanisms, they wouldn't watch it. Like, even if it is anime. Anime is not a thing, but it's just weird to see how people interact with pieces of media. And something I've noticed with the Zoomer generation is that they're more forthcoming with anime as a form of media to digest. And sadly, the way I see it now is, if anything is sparking the interest of joining sports clubs, it's probably the sports section of manga. And if anything's keeping, right, because there's mixed martial arts anime, there's mangas. Saying anime, there's a very big distinction, right? One's a TV show and one's a like a book. Manga's just like a comic book, but their comic books are far more denser because they're more interested in, because it's a weekly thing. And that's the funny thing, right? Like, why did both of, like, we had two distinct mediums kind of start around the same time, America, Japan, but yet one is not only, it didn't really thrive during the 80s, but one of them survived. One of them clearly has made it farther than the other. But what were the key differences is kind of very interesting. I don't know. It's probably, I guess, the way that the culture kind of is being guided along here in America. But I have a lot of hope, because I look at the Zoomer generation, kind of are very doomery about the Zoomer generation, but I'm like, but they're digesting the best storylines. They're digesting the best story medium, because I think I've cried more watching anime than I have, and reading manga and reading light novels, than I have a lot of Western media. I think one of the shows that I enjoyed the most for its highs and lows was NCIS. which is show nobody would really watch back in those days when I was growing up watching it. Like I was a very weird kid. I grew up watching like Seinfeld and Frasier. So no. Storylines are very important. Like giving context to groups of people is very important. And I think our cultures have developed very differently, but it is safe to assume that there are problems with the medium of anime. So I brought up that director because he said anime was a mistake. I think what he was pointing to was the degenerate. Yeah, we can call it degenerate. The people inside of these circles will be like, no, 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 you're just the man of taste. And it's just like, no, right? But you know, it comes with the fact that we understand what's morally right and morally wrong, and we're just making jokes of it. But newer people who come into the space kind of look at that behavior and they, right? I came from an era where you were kind of bullied and shamed for liking this sort of medium, but at the end of the day, I just remember that one video of the guy who's just like out in the middle of the ocean and he's just like, never give up, never give up. And it really speaks to my soul. Kind of look at anime as a bit like soul food, and not in the sense of the South, not the American South. By soul food, I mean like reading a good story nourishes a part of me that is very unexplainable. Um, there is something very deeply. There is something very deep that some stories just hit, and when they hit, they hit. Anyway, I think I talked about everything I wanted to, and I'm only 17 minutes in. Yay! Yeah, my name is Ramirez, Rami. Hopefully, I can keep doing these episodic episodes because one step at a time, we move forward. I guess. Bye bye. Oh no, I hit record.